we can now start talking about, I don't know, maybe a prescribed program that someone might do within a gym or within a certain time frame at their house. But we're now more talking about exercise. And that moves us on nicely to Chapter 11, which is the core program. So could you tell us why a core program is important for low back pain and what sort of exercises people might want to consider?
Yes, we're now leaving the first stage of getting a back pain patient better. The first stage was to desensitize their back pain, but now we're going on to building their body to create a foundation for pain-free activity. So that's what we mean by a core program, and we're going to have to consider what is the blend of stability and mobility that will best suit the person's demands and their body features. Let me talk about core stability just to start this off. There are some people who say, oh, it's not important. That's not what we measure at all. There are 3 essential, non-negotiable elements of core stability, and if you don't have them, you won't move. So the first one is the principle of proximal stability for distal mobility. Consider a backhoe that digs in the ground. They have to put down what are called stabilizers, which are outriggers that lift the back wheels off the ground and root the vehicle into the ground so it can actually dig and pull distally. That is proximal stability to perform distal mobility and athleticism. And if you don't do that, you won't dig very much in the ground. Your body is exactly the same. Consider the pec major muscle. So it's a uniarticular muscle that crosses the shoulder joint. Let's say you can bench press 200 kilos or 440 pounds. You've got a terrific pec major muscle. But now you're going to stand and push an object or a person. You can only bench press half your body weight and then you fall over. So if you did a one-armed press standing, the limit is actually core stiffness. You will never use your pec major muscle until you have a stiff core underneath it. Consider this. The pec major spans the shoulder joint. So distally, on the arm side of the shoulder joint, it flexes the arm around. But proximally, it bends the rib cage towards the shoulder joint. So if you pushed someone and all you used was the pec major, your torso would twist towards your shoulder, the arm would come around weakly. In other words, it's a very incompetent movement. But if you stiffened the core and locked down the proximal side of that muscle, 100% of the contraction would be expressed distal into arm speed, or it's the same with the hips. The hips generate power. If the spine bends, you leak power and you wouldn't get a very effective run or jump or whatever it happens to be. That also would be a pain trigger. So why would you move to sensitize the spine and be incompetent in terms of strength and speed? So that's the first non-negotiable feature of core stability. The second one is the torso forms a guy wire system. So the spine is a stack of vertebrae. The very first time we watched a spine injury occur under video fluoroscopy, the spine buckled. And it buckled because of inappropriate sequencing of the guy wire system around the core. So a proper guy wire system allows the spine to bear huge loads. In fact, we've had 2 lifters now set world records in squatting. And a big part of it is building a core of iron so that stack, that curved stack of vertebra, from an engineering point of view, you're containing the thrust line down through the spine. And a very robust guy wire system is needed. So that's the second non-negotiable point of core work. The third one has to do directly with pain. At any time you have an injury in the body, it creates a joint laxity. So if you consider someone who's damaged their knee ligaments, for example, the drawer test will show if the joint is unstable and if it's creating a pain trigger. The shear tests of the spine will show exactly the same thing. So if someone has damaged a disc a little bit, it's a little bit flat, that joint will now have micro movements. Those micro movements may be the source of pain. But immediately you experiment with the patient, performing different types of muscle bracing strategies, and you will find the tuning that forms the right girdle to take the micro movements and their pain away. So then that becomes a strategy that they use when they're going to cause pain through an offensive task. They know how to mitigate that by creating appropriate stiffness. So there is the essential non-negotiable elements of core stability. It has nothing to do with transverse abdominis and all this other stuff that some physical therapists have propagated over the years. It's much more than that. Then what's the best way to build that stability in someone who has back pain sensitivity? We found what we call the big three exercises to be the very best way. The modified curl up, the side plank, and the bird dog exercise. And when you measure that, they add a residual stiffness that lasts in some people an hour or two. You will run faster after creating that stiffness. You've got more proximal stiffness to unleash the hips. Some people have immediate pain control after doing those exercises. And if you're one of those people, I would suggest do those exercises mid-morning and midday, and you will get 2 times to assist in desensitizing it. Anyway, there is the first discussion of tuning the body for a little bit of stiffness and stability, but then you've got to have mobility if you're going to reduce mobility in the core if that's the pain trigger. So then more mobility at the hips and shoulders. But again, a few tests will reveal if the mobility is part of the pain trigger. For example, some people may report, oh, I've got tight hamstrings. I've been stretching my hamstrings for a couple of years, but I still have back pain. I still feel tight hamstrings. And yet when we assess them, they don't have tight hamstring muscles. They have tight sciatic nerves because of something going on in their lumbar spine. And when we stop the hamstring stretching and deal with the original mechanism in their back, after a brief period of time, their hamstrings start to loosen up. So anyway, there's an example of appropriate mobility. I can give another very fine example with the psoas muscle in the front. Long-term back pain, and we've documented this, tends to inhibit the gluteal muscles and facilitate the psoas, not the iliopsoas, but just the psoas. Then when we stretch the psoas to give a bit more mobility, we use different techniques to prove that some people have a very strong fascial connection through the lateral and frontal chain of their body, so that certain arm movements will actually change psoas tension. But we do a test to see if they have this connection or not. And if they do, then the stretch isn't only a hip stretch, it has to be coupled with specific arm movements. But if they don't have that connection, it really doesn't matter. Anyway, there's just a little bit of a start in the whole world of tuning a body to remove the pain.